On December 1st, the Israeli Defense Force released the following statement. Hamas violated the operational pause and, in addition, fired towards Israeli territory. The IDF has resumed combat against the Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza. And with that, the 7-day pause in hostilities between Israel and Hamas ended. During the ceasefire, Hamas released 78 Israeli and dual national hostages as part of the exchange deal that began on November 24th. At the same time, Israel released 240 Palestinian prisoners, all women or teenagers. Among those released by Hamas were 2 Americans, 3 Israeli-Russian dual nationals, 23 Thais, and 1 Filipino. According to the Washington Post, an estimated 130 hostages are still being held by Hamas as well as other militant groups, including Palestinian Islamic Jihad, whose fighters also took part in the October 7th attack. The ceasefire went beyond the original 4 days as Hamas accepted Israel's offer to extend the deal for 1 day for every 10 hostages released. But after 2 extensions, Israel demanded that the framework for further extensions be changed to include all women and children being held, and Hamas appeared either unwilling or unable to coordinate internally within the time limit to agree to those terms. The negotiations were also complicated on the final day by an attack on a bus stop in Jerusalem by 2 local Hamas-affiliated gunmen who jumped out of a car with an M16 and a handgun and killed a 24-year-old woman, a 67-year-old man, and a 73-year-old man who happened to be a rabbi. The gunmen were in turn killed by 2 soldiers and an armed civilian who happened to be nearby at the time of the attack. And as the IDF statement indicates, the ceasefire was also short-circuited by as many as 50 rockets fired by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad from northern Gaza into southern and central Israel. The rocket attack was surprising and an indication of the ongoing challenge Israel is facing in its campaign to eradicate Hamas because the weapons were fired from an area that was believed to have been neutralized by Israeli Air Force strikes and IDF artillery weeks ago. The IDF's challenges were also vividly captured in a documentary created by journalist Itai Hangel that follows an IDF reserve recon unit around Gaza for a few days. In the video titled Back to Gaza, Hangel shows a reserve recon unit fighting house to house, picking its way through the rubble, searching a school and other civilian buildings for booby traps and landmines while dodging bullets. Every crack in the concrete could be a sniper position, and every hole in the dirt could be a tunnel entrance. And speaking of tunnels, yesterday the IDF said they had used the ceasefire period to gather intel on the tunnels, and as a result, they claimed to have found and destroyed 200 of them along with associated weapons stockpiles in Jebel Lia, where their effort was focused on the first day of fighting following the ceasefire. In the process, the IDF also claims they neutralized what they described as 2 terror cells, although it's unclear how many Hamas casualties there were as a result. Among those the IDF claims to have neutralized is a Hamas leader who helped plan the October 7th attacks. As discussed on an episode posted right after the IDF launched its campaign into Gaza, the original strategy was to cut the strip in half at the Gaza Wadi, creating a sanctuary for refugees in the southern part of the area, and then advance on Gaza City, the Hamas headquarters, from 3 directions, first containing the enemy, then destroying them. But now the Israelis claim that the ceasefire allowed Hamas fighters to move to the south and reconstitute in the city of Khan Yunis. And as a result, along with focusing on Jebel Lia to the north, the Israeli Air Force pounded a number of targets in Khan Yunis, including apartment buildings that Palestinians said were occupied by innocents, in spite of the IDF's claim of solid intel that indicated they were being used as a Hamas command center. Concerned third-party governments say that the IDF is moving the goalposts, as it were, and that the southern strikes refute Israel's claim that they are prosecuting their campaign with an eye on protecting civilians to the greatest degree possible, while the Israelis say the change is necessary to accomplish their mission of eliminating Hamas, and they continue to blame Hamas for using non-combatants as human shields. The Netanyahu administration has also suffered recent bad press after a New York Times article broke the news that a year ago Israeli intelligence came into the possession of a 40-page document with very specific details about Hamas's plan, codenamed Jericho Wall, to attack the kibbutzes around southern Israel, but the Israelis did nothing about it because those higher up in the chain of command assessed that Hamas didn't have the means to carry out the plan. The validity of that assessment has been mitigated by critics' claims that Prime Minister Netanyahu downplayed the threat as he shifted security resources to the border with the West Bank in an effort to appease radical Jewish settlers there who formed his right-wing political base. When asked about the report, the Israeli military declined to comment and instead said it was currently focused on eliminating the threat from terrorist organization Hamas. The IDF added, questions of this kind will be looked into at a later stage. The Israelis have also attempted to counter charges of war crimes and genocide as they unflinchingly prosecute their war against Hamas by keeping the focus on the savagery and barbarism of the October 7th attacks. To that end, they created a 48-minute compilation of body cam footage that shows the terrorists committing unspeakable acts against not just IDF soldiers, but also women and children, while laughing and cheering and phoning their friends and relatives about it. And then this week, the Israelis released select footage of captured Hamas fighters being interrogated. In the excerpts, the prisoners state that what happened on October 7th was exactly what was planned, and that they were told specifically to kill civilians and to take hostages. Some of them expressed disdain towards their leaders for cynically ordering them to commit atrocities in the name of the cause while sitting comfortably in Qatar. The bottom line of this media is that it shows that the atrocities were the essence of the plan, not something that organically unfolded as the mission went along. And the Israelis want to use that to draw a distinct line between cultures and ensure world opinion favors their side of the conflict and associated military aid keeps coming. For their part, American officials have expressed concern about how Israel is fighting the war. Without deviating from supporting Israel over Hamas, officials like Secretary of State Blinken and Vice President Harris have publicly stated a belief that IDF operations have created too much civilian suffering and that going forward the Israelis need to do a better job of attending to collateral damage and the plight of the refugees their campaign has created. And what is perhaps the problem masked as a solution and an indication of how challenging ending this crisis is going to be, Secretary Blinken told the press in Qatar that he believes that the Palestinian Authority could be a viable alternative to Hamas in governing the Gaza Strip. But Jabril Rajoub, secretary of Fatah's Central Committee, which is part of the Palestinian Authority under President Mahmoud Abbas, praised Hamas's October 7th massacre, portraying it as a defensive action against Israel's, quote, aggression, end quote. Rajoub characterized the attack as being part of a, quote, defensive war full of epics and heroics that the Palestinian people have been fighting for 75 years, end quote. So between that and the IDF's expansion of the war zone, it seems like resolution of this crisis is a long way off. But we'll be covering it as the information becomes available. So if you're not already a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything going forward. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.